Well, a major debate is shaping up on Hillary Clinton's legacy as Secretary of State. The issue sparking strong opinions, with polls showing her the front-runner for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2016. Supporters point to achievements in several areas. These include nuclear negotiations with Iran. They say Mrs. Clinton ramped up the sanctions and the pressure that eventually brought Tehran to the negotiating table. They also highlight her role in focusing on China, getting the Obama administration to take a tougher line on Beijing's rising military power. But critics of Hillary Clinton also are taking aim. They point to the so-called reset button with Russia, in which the administration hoped to start a new chapter in our relations with Moscow. With Ukraine heating up, those hopes seem like a distant dream. And, of course, there is Benghazi, then Secretary Clinton catching major heat for dismissing the importance of whether the attack that killed 4 Americans was indeed an act of terrorism.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Much to discuss here. Ambassador Adam Early is former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the State Department and former U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain. Christian Whiten is a former State Department Senior Advisor, the author of Smart Power Between Diplomacy and War. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Ambassador Early, Hillary Clinton's major accomplishment, what would it be? What do you see as her top achievement as Secretary of State?
I think Secretary Clinton was a very effective CEO of the State Department. Remember, the Secretary of State has 2 jobs. One is to be the foreign policy advisor to the President. The other is to run the State Department. I think she did both extremely effectively. She gave good, unvarnished, and welcome advice to the President of the United States, which he clearly respects and appreciates. And number 2, she did a very, very strong job of running the State Department. She got strong budgets for the State Department. She advanced its ranks and file. And remember, she did all this at a time of serious budget constraints when Congress was looking to cut. And she persuaded our legislators and the public that a strong America at home depends on a robust diplomacy abroad.
All right. Christian, how do you see it?
Well, I think Adam's right that there are 2 jobs to being State, but she was terrible at both. I mean, you mentioned China and Iran. Those can't be touted as part of successes because the Iran deal leads to a nuclear arm Iran. We also turned our back on the dissent movement in Iran. China, Hillary went over and said human rights don't matter. And what China has only gotten more powerful, fights us in cyberspace, expanding in the Pacific, confronting our Navy. I think when people look back at her tenure, they'll remember the Russia reset, which has elevated Russia from a second-tier threat to a first-tier threat, a primary threat, and they'll remember Libya, which resulted in the death of an ambassador who had implored Hillary Clinton for more security. And also when it comes to administering the State Department, that other job, Hillary was corrupt. If you look at Huma Abedin, her senior advisor, whom she allowed to consult and conceal that income, consulting on matters within her portfolio. If you look at Cheryl Mills, Hillary's lawyer and political fixer, who intimidated Benghazi witnesses and hushed up investigations of corruption. You see that the Clinton corruption we became familiar with when these people were in the White House existed also when she was managing the State Department.
Of course, these questions are important in large part because Hillary Clinton seems well positioned, should she decide to do so, to run for the White House. If you look at the Fox News polls that are just out, among the 2016 Democratic potential nominees, 69% say they like Hillary Clinton, as opposed to 14% for Joe Biden and 6% for Elizabeth Warren. And there you see a couple of the other potential contenders. And then asked, on the issues, registered voters, who do they like in terms of, whether their positions on the issues are about right. Hillary Clinton comes in way ahead of Chris Christie and Jeb Bush with 46%. Does her experience at the State Department, Mr. Ambassador, does that make it, in your view, does it make her a potentially good president?
Well, should former Secretary Clinton announce that she's running for office, I think she will be a very formidable candidate. And if she's elected, I think she'll be a very strong president based on my experience with her and her team at the State Department. Look, Secretary Clinton is a unique combination, I think, of a hard-nosed realist and a very deft practitioner of soft diplomacy. on the hard-nosed realism side, she understands American power and how to use it to defend American interest. I would disagree with your other guest in his assessment of China and Iran and Russia and Libya. I think, to the contrary, that Secretary Clinton very clearly understood the challenges that these countries pose to America and its allies, and she used American power very effectively in countering those challenges. Yet at the same time, and this is very important for a president or a secretary of state, she understands and sympathizes and can support the aspirations of the great majority of people in this world who aren't, interested in great power rivalry, but are simply interested in getting the vote, getting food, having economic opportunity, and she knows how to attend to that as well.
I need to save some time for Christian here, because Christian, he mentioned, for instance, Russia. You can't look at what's going on in Russia right now vis-a-vis Ukraine and call it a success.
Hillary is very much like President Obama. She thinks that she is a magical icon that can transform the world. Michael Goodwin of the New York Post put it best: Hillary is famous for being famous. So if you believe that, you believe that you can go over to Russia with a plastic reset button and get them to reevaluate how they see their national interests. And then you can go use a bunch of language like, well, this is how countries should behave in the 21st century. So there's that, and then there's reality. And it's amusing to me that Hillary considers herself realist, because there's no connection between reality and what she did. What she did when she was secretary was rack up a lot of frequent flyer miles. So when she was out in the Cook Islands, for example, one of the many, many irrelevant places she visited, people were making decisions in the White House. That's where policy is made, and Hillary was divorced for it. And when she was involved in policy making, it was disastrous. It was Libya. It was Russia. I mean, ultimately, Hillary's an icon. She's famous for being famous. She has a record of zero accomplishment, and I think it's a real disservice to the Democratic Party that she has kept out other candidates from being considered.
We'll get you back on another time. A lot to discuss. Christian Whiten, Ambassador Adam Early. Thank you.